morning once again. Kathy asked me not to introduce her in great detail, so I will. Kathy Black is a professor of social work and gerontology at my university, University of South Florida at Sarasota, Manatee. Dr. Black obtained her PhD from, is it SUNY or SUNY? SUNY Albany, and master's degrees in social work and gerontology from University of Southern California, master's degree in public health from University of California, LA. Dr. Black is Next Avenue Top 50 National Influencers in Aging, a Hartford Geriatric Social Work Faculty Scholar, a Fellow in Gerontology Society of America, and the Patterson Foundation Initiative Consultant for Age-Friendly Sarasota. Dr. Black has 40 years of experience. That's how old you are, aren't you? With older adults and their families in the capacity of geriatric case manager, medical social worker, geriatric nurse in acute and long-term care, hospital, nursing home, and community-based settings. She has conducted more than 200 presentations in the field of health and aging. Her expertise is in the area of planning in advance for care throughout the end of life, geriatric mental health, and aging in community. She is a principal investigator, which is a big deal for us researchers, for more than a dozen grants, and has authored over 50 peer-reviewed publications. She is on the editorial boards of Research on Aging, Aging and Society, Social Work and Mental Health, and the Journal of Social Service Research. Don't you think we are honored to have her come here and speak to us? And she did tell me that she speaks to generally an audience of 100 plus, and I can see at least 100 people here, because I told her every female member of my club is worth 5 males. Welcome, Kathy.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's so much content to cover, so I'm going to go kind of quickly because there's a lot to share, and I look forward to questions from everybody. So the first thing I think everybody knows, the world is aging. Every second, 2 people turn 65 around the world. Of all the people who've ever been alive over age 65, 2/3 of them are alive today. A child born today is expected to, 50% of children born today are expected to live to age 100. And society has to catch up with promoting healthy aging throughout the life course so that people thrive throughout every day of their lives and don't spend their last period of life in decline. That's always been the goal of gerontology, to keep people as healthy as possible, and literally that people die in their sleep, or so that they don't spend decades in decline. And we can change that. And this is just the normal view of aging was fairly negative. Unfortunately, we are an ageist society. We are socialized to associate aging with decline and negativity, and that view is changing. As you can see there, thank you ARP for helping with this graph. But it really is. I don't think any of us would turn the clock back a day. Now we might want that younger skin, but we wouldn't turn the clock back as far as what we've gained. Isn't that true, everybody? It's so much better. So we need to celebrate and optimize this longevity, and we need to do more. And I'll share with you how we can do that. So Age-Friendly Sarasota is an initiative that promotes active, healthy, and engaged living for people at all life stages and abilities throughout the life course. That means that just because people have hearing issues or vision issues or cognitive issues or mobility issues, people are full members of society, and I know that Rotarians honor that implicitly in everything that you do. And turns out that 8 community features really make a difference in how people experience aging. And I'll talk about those in greater detail in just a moment. So we were required to look at what are the assets of our community in these areas, and what is it that people want as they age. And of course, old age is always decades older than we are. We all hold a secret inner age, and nobody really likes to think about the future. Unfortunately, the future ends up, and we are sometimes caught off guard and unprepared. But our genetics and lifestyle affect our aging a little bit. turns out that our community can really impact the experience of aging, and this is where we can all play a role. And so again, we looked at the assets and aspirations of people along those areas, and I just want to point out here that everybody's a stakeholder in aging society. It's one of the things I love about this work. It's something that brings us together at this very divisive time in our country. Aging is something that joins us together. Everybody is aging. Technically, gerontologists don't look at aging until people reach sexual maturity after adolescence. The period before that is growth and development in all species. But some people do want to talk about aging from birth on or prenatal on, and that's fine. The reality is we are getting older every day. But it turns out that people can play a big role. Government clearly plays a role. Businesses play a role, nonprofits, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Let me just give you an example right here. When we talked about transportation, we did focus groups throughout the community and surveys throughout the community, and we asked people about transportation, and people are concerned not if, but when, because we outlive our safe driving abilities by about 10 years, and we live in an auto-dependent world. And so how are we going to get around? And by the way, when we stay cooped up in the house, a whole negative cascade of events can start. Depression, falls, risk of scamming, you name it. So as you can see, a lot of this work is focused on prevention, keeping people active and engaged and outside of their community. And so when we ask people about transportation, there's kind of crickets in the room. People, and they, everybody has different feelings about the role of government, but boy, people are counting on government to solve the transportation issue, I'll tell you that one. And I will tell you that in our community, public transportation will never solve the issue. We heard from people who, they didn't come from communities where public transportation was a part of their routine, and so they just are unaccustomed to it, they won't use it. We heard particularly from older in our community who were fearful of going on the bus, afraid of being knocked over. We heard from people who are unable to walk to that bus stop, unable to wait in that hot sun in an unprotected shelter, and people who need a door-to-door service. So public transportation is not going to work for everyone. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ITN, Independent Transportation Network. This is a program started by Kathleen Freud in Maine. Her 5-year-old child was hit by an older driver back in the 80s. Rather than get angry, she said, my God, what are we doing to people when we take their keys away? They have nothing. And so she created a volunteer driving program. They're in over 30 states now. There's 2 in Florida, 1 is in Sarasota. And they do give volunteer rides. But ITN and public transportation will never solve the nation's problem. Kathleen Freud from ITN now says that the solution to the nation's senior transportation problem is sitting in everybody's driveway. And to what extent can neighbors play a role? Now, of course, technology is going to play a role. The autonomous vehicles, streaming, telemedicine, all of these things are going to be making a difference to help people get the access to things that they need. But transportation is so critical. It is about access to volunteering, to work, to enjoyment, to amenities. It is so central, and it's something we need to talk further about. Oh, there we go. Oh, there. Oops, it went too quick there. Okay, so housing. A lot of the areas have to do with our infrastructure, the built environment. Most of us want to age in place. Study after study, in our community, over 90% want to age in their homes. But less than 1% of the nation's homes are equipped with universal design features. What are universal design features? Things like having the doorway 36 inches to accommodate that wheelchair. God forbid we end up needing one. Having at least 1 seat height counter. Again, God forbid we're unable to stand. To having a bathroom on the first floor, 0 clearance entry. Simple, and by the way, everybody says, oh, how much is it going to cost? How much? Well, at the time of building, there's virtually no cost difference, by the way. And Sarasota County now has a voluntary provision for builders to build with universal design, and they're fast-track permitting, they're incentivizing them. That's going to be helpful on new stock. The greater concern is existing housing stock, and it is costly to retrofit. But a lot of these things can be done differently by thinking differently. For example, a doorknob is wrist twisting to an arthritic hand. There's no cost difference from having a door lever. And a lever, and most of the universal design principles work for people of all ages. So a lever is good for an arthritic hand. It's also good for somebody carrying children, somebody carrying groceries. So it works for everyone. Again, no cost difference. And I want you to know that some communities have actually gone so far. Vancouver, Canada has outlawed doorknobs in all construction, including private homes. So it's simple changes like that that can make a difference. And there's a variety of other things like having, if you don't have the grab bar in the bathroom, at least putting the stud in the wall. So there's so many things that can be done, and the technology is out there, and again, people don't know about it. But unfortunately, if they have a stroke or they have some sort of episode, they wish they had known about it. We need to do a better job of educating the public if they want that to be a lifelong home. So universal design is one thing. The other big thing that we're seeing around the nation is an emergence of co-housing. I recently presented at the American Society on Aging with New York City, DC, and San Francisco. And I have to tell you, if you think housing is unaffordable here, DC, New York City, San Francisco, hello. And as they said, they can't build themselves out of it. We still have some East County real estate, but I will tell you that shared housing is a growing, it's part of the mosaic. It's not for everyone, but we've got over 40,000 people 60 and over in Sarasota County living alone. And we've got, there's a great interest, particularly among 1 out of 3 boomers is single. Now they may be partnered, but generally the boomers have smaller families, there's projections ahead about caregiving with less children. We heard from people in our community, I'm not married, I don't have kids, what is there for me? And people are realizing that they have to rely on their friends and neighbors. And so co-housing is really growing as an option, particularly for boomer women and particularly for widowed women who have a less likely chance of remarrying. There are social benefits as well as immediate economic benefits, and I think it needs to be part of the mosaic when we talk about it. Now, of course, matching needs to occur. And there are quite a few groups out there who are helping people figure out how do you deal with the adult children coming to visit? What about managing the kitchen and things like that? It's not for everybody, but it will be a solution for some people, and it will be a very good one. So that's on housing. I mentioned transportation a moment ago, very serious issue, and again, a lot of people are not thinking about it, talking about it. I wrote an editorial in the paper a few weeks ago. I don't know if any of you saw it. But people started writing into the paper about, well, my older neighbor really shouldn't be on the road. I'm here to tell you that there should be no chronological age limit on driving. Right now, the vision test is every 8 years for people until they are age 80. At age 80, it's every 6 years. And just to let you know, to pass that vision test, you need 20/40 and at least one eye. I usually bring my prompt with me, little plastic baggie, folded in half. That's 20/40. And, but as you know, there are people who are 40-year-olds who it should be based on ability and not chronological age. Outdoor spaces and buildings, we know that right-of-way space is 30% of our outdoor space alone. We need to do a better job in our outdoor spaces. How many of you have encountered buildings that are difficult to push? How many of us who are frail are going to be able to open those doors and access buildings? So physical spaces really matter. The parks, let me just share with you on the parks. They need to be built for the people that live there. Over 50% of Sarasota's residents are age 50 and older. Our parks need to have walking trails for us. But things by default that are going to keep us active, healthy, and engaged. Many of you have visited parks all over the world that have these things. In China, in 50,000 state parks, they have senior exercise equipment. It's not Gold's Gym, it's basic range of motion, but it's the point is it's keeping people healthy, and people do use it by default, and that's what we need to do. And you guys have seen the Tai Chi and the yoga that they do at other parks. We need to have these things available for people. Remember, keeping people active cognitively, socially, physically, spiritually. All these things are good to people. It pays dividends. Volunteering and a club like this to speak to is just such an honor, because you guys understand this more than anybody. We have people in some cases spending more years in retirement than their working lives. That is social capital that's languishing. The average retiree spends 8 to 9 hours a day watching television. And how can we at least get some of that time towards a variety of social needs that are out there? Working with children, working with causes. And look, we're just happy to, even if you want to just read a book at the library, we're just happy to get people active and engaged. But of course, you guys are real leaders in that. We need to do more in volunteering. Some of the things that are happening around the world are time banks. Some of you might have experienced that. Micro-volunteering is an emerging trend. Somebody who doesn't want to commit to every Tuesday from 2 to 5, but hey, I got 2 hours right now, what could I do? So there's a whole bunch of things that are happening. We need to do more in our community to create those opportunities. Work, the new word for retirement for the boomers, as you all know, is work. Unfortunately, people are unable to finance their extended longevity. They're aware of it. We heard in our work, and by the way, on our website, you can see our community report. We looked at we had about 1,200 people in every zip code in Sarasota County, and we separated the data by boomers and non-boomer older adults. The boomers are much more cost conscious. They realize that they need to finance their longevity, and we need to, employers need to have accommodations for older employees who may not be able to stay on their feet as long as they did in their previous working life. People who need, I mean, I spoke to Venice Suncoast 50-plus group just a few months ago, and there were people in the audience desperately looking for a job, but yet the job needed to accommodate their dialysis schedule, their caregiving responsibilities to their spouse, their limits in accessing for transportation. We need to have a society where people can get their needs met and stay civically, socially, and economically engaged in this world. Respect and social isolation, again, the reality is we've been so bombarded with negative images of aging. We are ageist. Some of the worst ageism you might see is actually old age on older age ageism. People are judged old on the basis of superficial features, and we heard from our community people who were greatly disrespected due to slowed mobility, hearing aids, you name it. We need to do a better job. This is a community for everybody, and it's inclusive, and everybody needs to be treated with respect across the lifespan. The literature suggests our greatest hope is with young children, and by the way, it's happening because they're being socialized to see that age is really becoming quite blurred, and people in their 80s and 90s and 100s still working and being role models. And yeah, how many of you remember Jack LaLanne? I mean, he died at like 96. He looked the same as he did in the 50s, everybody. He's just proof of what you can look like. So those images are changing, and that's part of the great transition that we're in right now. Activities, Sarasota County is very rich in activities. Every possible activity you could imagine. Our concern would be that they should be available at every price point. We did hear from people who are unable to afford things that they previously enjoyed doing. And again, the goal is to keep people out there and engaged. But this is one area where we're doing quite well. Remember, every community differs on this, and some communities need to step this up. I was at a presentation in Age Friendly Chicago was bragging that they created one social program in their library for their older adults. And in case you haven't been to our libraries, and about 3/4 of us have a library card in Sarasota County, they are senior centers. They are all sorts of programming and engagement with people of all ages without the negative connotation of old age, because a lot of people don't want to associate with being old. Our libraries are a treasured resource for all of us. Communication information. This refers to the information that people need to live well. And by the way, we live in an information overload society. And people need to get access to information when they need it. You know, one of the reasons why hospice is so poorly utilized as a resource to later in life is because people, if they need it at 2 o'clock on a Friday morning, and that's when they want to find out about it. They don't want to look about it 2 years in advance. So we need to make sure that information is available to people. It will be increasing digital age, but today we have to have outreach to people in every possibility. We have plenty of people who have smartphones and computers, don't want to click on it, prefer the paper, and we need to make sure that our outreach is in a variety of formats. It's not just the content, but it's also the format. Aging eyes require larger font sizes. They require distinction in color, and we also, again, look at our businesses. Talk about a no-cost change. Next time you print that menu, make the font size bigger. How many times have we all been in a business and we can't read? Guess what? When the communication is clear to an aging eye, it also benefits that younger eye. You know, I'm on a big group in Tallahassee with the Florida Department of Transportation, and they have done really tremendous things to. How many of us have benefited from the advanced signage where it says mound, next left? That's good for every eye. It's good for the aging eye. It's good for newcomers to the area. So those are the sorts of things that we need to do for better communication. And also, hearing loss is a very real issue. Most places need to be accommodated with hearing loops, and we need to be very respectful of people being able to interact and be involved in hearing. And again, just that aging is lifelong. There was a New York Times article a few years back, front page, record numbers of hearing loss among millennials who are listening with the earbuds. And so this is a huge issue. And then, of course, our community supports and health services. These are traditional things that help us when we age. What we heard from our community, though, are things that are not covered by Medicare. We heard about people needing great help during caregiving. And 1 out of 4 of us is a caregiver. You know what Rosalind Carter, who has a caregiver center, you know what she says? There are 4 types of people in the world. Those who have provided care, those who are providing care, those who will provide care, and those who need care. So we are all invested in caregiving, and how do we help people who are caregiving? Also helping people with loss at the end of life. I think it's an talked about issue, and an issue that greatly affects people and changes their lives. And we need to be more accommodating on that. We heard about people needing help at home. We heard about people needing the leaves out of their roof. People who need a light bulb change, needed a curtain change. These are things that Medicare is not covering, and again, neighbors and other groups, and also vetted handymen, people that you can trust, because of course we have a lot of people scamming people who are vulnerable in our community as well. So there's a role for all of us in all of this. Everybody can play a role. I know that I'm concerned about several of our neighbors, and we check up on them, and I've given, of course I was a nurse, and so we've got a neighbor who's fallen, and the wife is very small, and I said, you call, and even if in the middle of the night, we don't care, we'll come over. So these are the sorts of things that we all need to be doing, and in my remaining time I'll be glad to take some questions.
A comment and a question. One comment is, if I were doing the kind of work you were doing, I sure would be looking at the societies that have honored, that have that traditional thing. You talked about the Tai Chi and all of that. That directly comes from the way that other cultures treat adults. Same with Africa. But the question I have is, since you focus so hard on transportation, which is one I think about, and to me, my dream is, in 5 years, I've got a driverless car. So I think there's a lot of us really hoping for that technology, and I wonder if organizations like AARP are trying to help push that direction and do funding, because I think that's...
it's definitely, it's here now, as you know. It's being trialed in Sumter County, and by the way, Sarasota County, 1 out of 3 is 65 and older. There are 4 counties in Florida that have higher proportions than that. Sumter County, where the villages are, 56% is 65 and older. They are trialing it. I go to a lot of transportation conferences these days, and I heard Roy LaHood speak. He was the Secretary of Transportation under Bush, and he said that driverless cars are going to add more road congestion. He said that some communities are going to do it right, and you're going to see pockets emerging. So I don't know how quick it's going to get here. I do agree that it's going to be safer. There's a lot of evidence that men are less likely to use it, less likely to give control up to that. But it is definitely out there. It's something that's also not talked about as much, but if we can keep people driving safer longer. So the car companies are actually doing more. I don't know how many of you already have on your vehicle that emergency braking feature. That will be standard on the main models by 2022. The back door, the camera is now, the backup camera is there. You're going to increasingly see more safety features, again, mostly will definitely help will help everybody, but will definitely help an aging population to stay safer on the road longer. So those are all part of it. Some of this is infrastructure change. We need to make sure that people have access to walkable environments. If you want, you can go onto your smartphones or your computer and put in walk score and do a walk score for your residents, and you'll get 2 readings out of a score of 100%. And the first score will tell you, on a score of 100, how close you are to walking to amenities. Now, of course, if you lived in a city center, if you lived in downtown Sarasota, you'd get a very high percentage. Or in New York City, you're going to get close to 100%. I live in Palmer Ranch. I got a 0. It's not walkable. The second reading will tell you how close you are to public transportation. I got a 1. and look at the amount of development that is occurring far away, and people are going, it's not Peter Pan housing. We don't stay the same age forever. We are going to need access to amenities and access to services, and building infrastructure and locating housing that's walkable or near amenities is definitely part. There's a multi-pronged approach here, and some of this is more long range, some of this is more immediate.
So what about technologies like Uber?
Uber and Lyft are phenomenal options today. They are increasingly hooking up with providers, and we're finding that missed appointments are less, and the provider is funding. And let me just tell you something about transportation that will probably blow your mind. It blew my mind. Pinellas County's public transportation, he presented with me at a Transplex event up in it was near Tallahassee, and they gave 8 million public rides on their public transportation in Pinellas County, and he said that if they gave every rider a $5 Uber voucher, it would still be far less than it cost to maintain that bus fleet. So this is it is changing before our eyes, people, and Uber and Lyft is here today, but as the people in transportation will tell you, they are not transportation providers, they are software companies. And so they're in it for different reasons. They are effective, and increasingly people are able to access them. Even if you don't have a smartphone, believe it or not, there's now ways that you can have it ordered and still use it. And again, providers are using it, and that's really helping people not miss appointments.
Isn't there a county upstate that actually has, is that the one that has free Uber for people?
Gainesville trialed it, and they are still, it was very successful.
Festival at Robots a month ago or so on aging, and I looked up specifically the Uber people, and there were 2 people at the counter. I said, are you drivers or corporate? It's in corporate. I said, why can't we have a way to get Uber on or Lyft on a regular cell phone? And the young woman said to me, you're sounding just like my father and mother. They want it so badly. And I think that she said, actually there are places where people are coming up with some ways to use Uber. They form a company. They'll call Uber for you.
Yes.
You can call them on your cell phone, and they call Uber, and you pay them a small fee, but they're growing at that and so desperate.
Yeah, these things are definitely happening, and Uber is, they're both here, and for those of you who've used it, you can actually see where they are and how long it takes for them to get to you, and the prices are generally good. It depends on where you are. But these are definitely going to be options. I happen to really like them because a lot of the people who are doing the driving are older adults who are getting a little part-time income, because remember, another goal there is keeping people active and some means of income as well.
You'd be happy to know the fountain at SUNY Albany is 9 degrees this morning.
I stay in touch with people every day back there, so believe me.
I have a question. Do you think, you know, in other cultures, it's not uncommon to have multi-generational households? It's just the way things have always been done. If they have kids that haven't gotten married, they're still in the household with grandparents. Do you think that in our culture, it's kind of, you know, the kids get old enough, you push them out of the house to go be independent? Do you think that plays a factor in the ageism that we experience in our country?
You know, it's already happening here. 1 out of 3 millennials is living at home. In case you haven't seen it or had your child come back yet, it is really becoming more commonplace. Part of it, you know, they did a study of high school students and young college students, and they said to them, so what do you think about older adults? They're mean, they're terrible drivers, they're stubborn. And then they said, well, what do you think about your grandparents? Oh, we love our grandparents. and then they said to them, well, where are you getting these messages? What are you reading in the paper to get these messages? And there was silence. And then finally one spoke up, we don't read the paper. And they don't. The new forms of communicating are text and Facebook and Snapchat. And actually Facebook is actually more for older adults now, Snapchat. And so there's so much change happening. We need to do everything we can do to strengthen the ties between all of us and not pit groups against each other. And when it comes to intergenerational relationships, it's not simply that younger people are in the same space as older people, just sort of walking by each other. It must be intentional interaction, and it must be based on reciprocity. It's not just what younger people can do for older people, but what older people can do for younger people, and shared learning. That's going to strengthen that bond. And of course, Rotarians have been known for that for so long.
All right.
Wasn't that wonderful? And very, very relevant to all of us. Actually, Kathy, I come from a culture where elders are heavily respected. In fact, so much so that we have a tradition in India of touching the feet of an elder, which is our way of submitting our ego to the elder. And the elder is supposed to bless us with all the good wishes. And having a joint family with 3 generations used to be a standard, at least when I left India, and still has some value. Like my sister, her husband, her parents, that is my sister's parents-in-law, and the children, all in one house. And it was standard, no big deal. So perhaps there are opportunities, as Stan was mentioning, of exploring other cultures. Perhaps one way of describing American culture is privacy. And that could be the challenge. And there is an opportunity for us to investigate that. So perhaps we will get you to come and talk a little bit more after we do our research. In the meantime, not Uber transport, but a little elephant transport. On behalf of all my friends here in Rotary, I would like to thank you for a wonderful talk and really appreciate that. And pull out the ticket for me, please. And the 50/50's last 3 characters are 725. That's Kathy, and you get to pull the joker. With that, we will, it's $7. We'll see you all next week. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to outsource this, go to Dawn.
Thank you for signing this.
Yeah, the whole title is wrong. But thank you for pointing out.